Hi, I'm Rachel Losser, founder and CEO of Losser Consulting Solutions, and you're listening to Big Project Energy, the podcast where we talk about controlling chaos, managing teams, and driving real project success. I am super excited to be joined by Nick Clarkson today. Nick is a professor turned project manager, and I'm super excited to chat because I think anybody who has been in the project management world knows that it's just a fun, interesting career path, and people sort of come into it in a lot of different ways. So I'm excited to talk to Nick about his project management journey and just kind of really get into some of those details of project success. So welcome, Nick.
Thank you. Really excited to be here. I'm excited to be talking project management. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I'm really curious. You started off as a professor and then have been kind of making this shift into project management. Can you kind of talk me through your professor journey and then how you are talking about project management now?
Yeah. So I was in higher ed for 13 years, and I was certainly really excited about and committed to the content I was teaching. But as I was looking around and thinking about what might be next for me, part of what I was noticing is that the work that most lights me up and that I'm most skilled at is about building sustainable systems for teams to perform well. Often what that looked like in the classroom was getting the students all to work together, to learn together, and move forward. But those facilitation skills and the kind of structuring, delivery, and requirements elicitation kind of stuff all transfers really well. So I got a project management certification, which helped me clarify the language I needed to translate the skills I already had into project management language. And now I'm full time project managing a job search. And I'm also volunteering as the web design team chair for Chronic Pain Anonymous. And yeah, I lead an 8-person volunteer team there. Everyone has chronic pain or chronic illness. So it comes with a lot of brain fog, a lot of capacity management work. But we've been doing some exciting projects, unblocking 3 projects in the first 6 months that were stalled for 2 years. So that's been a good place to try out the project management skills with the project management vocabulary in mind from the beginning.
I'm so curious in how you consider sort of the skills of being a professor, how those translate into project management. What was the moment where you were in the thick of it? I'm assuming a lot of the times that there's a lot of chaos and, you're dealing with a lot of stakeholders, i.e. students, right? And so just tell me about what was the moment where you were like, I need to go check this project management thing out, or, how did that all shake out?
Yeah, I mean, I think, when COVID started, we had a week of spring break to fully transition courses to online delivery, which I hadn't done before. So that was a process where I think before that, I was using the learning management system to deliver documents, collect assignments, grade, communicate with students, all of those sorts of things. And I had this long syllabus document that explained where is everything you need, what are the policies, and students would send me emails and ask where do I find the readings? And my response was it's in the syllabus. Please read the syllabus. That's what it's there for. But as we were transitioning online, I recognized that a number of my colleagues weren't using the learning management system at all. And I think that opened up my perspective that students had 4 to 5 different professors using the system in a wide variety of ways, organized in ways that made sense to us. And so each student was trying to get up to speed on what do I do in this course when I've just been working in this other system. So that I think really clarified for me that I'd been assuming there was a user problem, but the friction that I was hearing from students was actually a design problem. So in that transition, I implemented some standardized templates for the pages, more clear navigation, was more deliberate about communicating with them the first time we met. Again, here's how we're using this. Here's where you find what you need. Here's the communication procedure if something's not looking right. So I think that was a key instance of here's this crisis moment. We got to move fast, learning new tools. Everyone's super stressed. That I saw that I can implement some systems and at the end of the semester, students were really appreciative of. I mean, someone said somehow the course got even more organized when it moved online. And that felt really rewarding to recognize that like I could build structure that made things work better for people.
I actually love that because I think it also lends to a really great point, which is the sort of mindset and framework that folks have as project managers does sort of lend itself very well to operations and efficiencies and sort of like business process, which I think is so interesting because that's actually like a lot of the work that we've been getting is sort of project management-esque, but it is a lot of those like just kind of people and systems. So yeah, I'm very intrigued by that. So you kind of go through this process, you get all this good feedback, your class is super organized. When did you actually come to sort of know about project management as a discipline, and how are you bridging that gap into for from higher education into kind of it sounds like more corporate environment?
I mean, I don't know how clear this is to this audience. Try not to get too deep into it. Higher education as a field is headed for a lot of struggles. There are more and more universities that are shutting down, declining enrollments, all of these sorts of pressures. There was a point where the school I was teaching at experienced a hostile takeover and a dramatic change in the mission. And I was looking at the field of like, I could apply for another professor role, but those jobs were declining rapidly. And I felt like I don't want to move to another school, another state, just to have this happen again. So then I was like kind of exploring, like, okay, well, what else do I do with these skills? And I think project management came up quickly. I looked at instructional design a little bit. That isn't quite what I liked. I'm interested in like learning and design program management. But really, it's the building structure at a kind of system level that I'm most interested in. So, yeah, this emerged really quickly as like a clear fit for my skill set.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So I've kind of alluded a couple times to what I've been kind of lovingly calling like trad PM as sort of like the PMI, institute kind of basic project management practices. And we've talked a lot about the fact that that doesn't always exactly play out that way, or like not every organization adopts all aspects of, that kind of scope. So I'm just curious, what's your like kind of formula of project management or aspects that you like the most?
I think the project management certification process was really helpful for like a structured program that got me deep into a different vocabulary than what I'd been using before. I think something that's like really difficult to test on a multiple choice exam is like the people skills that actually make projects work. I've been thinking a lot about the ways that all of those pieces from the classroom translate really well to project management. I wrote recently on LinkedIn about some questions that I used frequently in the classroom when students were saying something that was off track for requirements elicitation. So instead of saying like, that's wrong, or like, here's the correct answer, my response was often more along the lines of, what do you mean when you like use that word? Like, what does that mean to you? What are you imagining? Like, what's the kind of mental model behind this? Or just like, before I answer your question, like, tell me more about what you're thinking about. And I think I like those kinds of open-ended facilitation skills are really useful for requirements elicitation, discovery, even just having positive relationships with stakeholders, because you're not like shutting down their perspective. You're giving them more space to talk about what's important to them and being kind of curious about what's going on for them in a way that facilitates alignment rather than shutting the conversation down. And like 13 years in the classroom gave me a lot of difficult lessons about what are the things I could say that will shut down conversation and make this a miserable experience for everyone for the rest of the semester. And what are the conversational and facilitation moves that open more space for people to engage in ways that like just compound over time, like they build trust when people know that you're interested in how they think rather than like, if they feel dismissed because you've shut them down.
I love that so much because you're operating from a place of mutual respect and, coming at the situation with a collaborative approach, or one might say like kind of a servant leader approach, which I think is so key for success because you do see folks come in with an ego or that their opinion is correct, right? And it does really stop progress in a lot of ways. And if you see project managers do that, I'm sure you've seen it too, or even just in working with your superiors.
Yeah.
If you come to the table with that sort of like, I am right, you are wrong approach, you're opening yourself up to not being able to make progress. And in some cases, if you can put your ego aside, it's actually like a strategic move. Like even if your gut reaction is like, I are so obnoxious, and why won't you just read the thing or do what you're told, or I've emailed this to you like 6 times, like still working towards ultimately that outcome. So I really love that approach.
Yeah, thanks.
We talked, kind of before we set this up, that a lot of your thought process and what I'm really interested to dive into is you have some thoughts about sort of managing capacity and mitigating sort of like a resource risk perspective. Could you just please outline the framework of this capacity planning that you're thinking of, and just kind of give a sense of this?
What I'm thinking about here is that when people are assigned to multiple different projects at the same time, ideas about another project are popping up. That drains some cognitive energy. Switching between project streams drains cognitive energy. And things like, I'm seeing this more and more in my AI usage. I set Claude up with a task, and then it's going to take a while. So I feel like I want to fill that time with something else, switch to like, I don't know, reading an email newsletter or, engaging on LinkedIn or something. That means every time I switch back to figure out like how to evaluate the output from the AI system, I'm paying a tax on reentry by like trying to remember what do I have going on here versus what I was just engaging with. So part of where this came from is that in my work in Chronic Pain Anonymous, everyone there is dealing with brain fog that arises from chronic pain and chronic illness, and everyone needs to do really careful capacity management for a very limited energy budget. And so our work there is really about like trying to maximize what we can get out of the energy we have, not wasting energy on like task switching and things like that that are really costly. The other context was like teaching through major institutional restructuring that was really stressful for students and watching their cognitive capacity decline through that process, having to reconfigure my expectations. I think both of those scenarios have taught me a lot about how energy intensive cognition is. And the work that our project teams need to do is often intellectually demanding. So this is where the capacity planning layer comes in. It's not to replace any of your project management documents, but it's something to think about as you're doing resource assignments and schedule planning. There are some formulas at the bottom that draw on the research about how long it takes for us to switch between tasks. So you can see like, okay, if this person is assigned to my project 70% of the time, but they're switching between this other project, what do I need to factor in as like their actual cognitive capacity for work? Because if you don't factor those times in, either your schedule is at risk and or your team is on a fast track to burnout. So I hope that that capacity planning layer will be useful to people.
Sometimes, especially in the corporate world, I do kind of feel like there could be undercurrents sometimes of just forgetting that you're dealing with humans and sort of disregarding like aspects of like mental load, just like entirely. I am curious, as I think about sort of playing devil's advocate and taking that sort of like harsh corporate stance, at times, like how much do you think the onus falls on the individual to sort of stack their projects or stack their day in a way that sort of, is conducive to that? Or, and how much of that responsibility do you think falls on the manager or the leader?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this because in the context where I've taught before, the idea was like students are supposed to be figuring this out, like they're supposed to be developing these skills so that they have them in the workplace. Um, I do think that like there's an element where, every employee needs to have task management, all of these kinds of skills that add up to being effective in their jobs. But I also think that there is a lot of space for the project manager to be helping team members maximize efficiency within what they're capable of. That may be one key place you could reduce some of the friction that's holding the project up. So this could be actually like a really simple conversation about, each time you switch between projects over the course of the day, you're losing time or you're losing cognition, or maybe it's a place where you need to advocate for your team a little bit more and sort of restructure assignments or something like that. You may not be able to always address this at the level that the capacity planning layer kind of implies, but if you go through the calculations, at least then you have a better sense of like where you're starting from and where the friction might arise.
Such a good point. And what I think is really funny about what you just said is that also means that you, as the project manager, could be part of the problem. If you're constantly pinging folks for an
Yep.
update, it's like, let them work, let them get the work done. There's no update since you asked me this morning. And then you are actually part of the problem, with the context switching. So I think that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the worksheet could be a useful diagnostic tool if there's a place where, you think that the assignments should be carried out on the schedule you had in mind, but they're not. Like, maybe look at the capacity planning thing and see if there's some friction there that could be addressed.
Yeah. And how does that how do you feel like that plays out in, we'll say, just like resource constrained environments? I mean, it's very common in the work that I'm doing that it's like, I don't really care what you think a reasonable timeline is. Like, you have 6 months, figure it out, kind of thing. So how does that play factor into, when you kind of start talking about capacity in a very constrained environment?
I mean, I feel like this is one of the other places that being a professor has prepared me well for project management work. That academic institutions are crisis-driven, resource-constrained environments with hard deadlines. Like the semester ends, the grades have to be submitted, and students are graduating, whatever the case may be. I don't have flexibility on the schedule. Part of what I'm thinking about within that, in terms of the people management piece, is that if you approach the work from a place of frantic intensity about meeting the schedule, everyone's work quality or pace drops. If you can be the person who comes in with calm energy and sets a container for your team to do the work and builds trust in a way that helps the team want to follow along with you rather than feeling like they're at risk or in danger if they don't, I think you'll get better results and you're more likely to meet your scheduled deadlines, or at least this is my perspective. Lead with the carrot rather than the stick.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I think there's definitely times for what I call the hammer, like there's times where you have to hit the hammer and, drive the project forward or drag everyone along with you. But yeah, you'll definitely, I agree, just get better results if everyone's on the same page and sort of running together versus you just trying to drag folks along.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So we've been having fun on our end exploring what big project energy is and what it sort of means to folks, because I think everyone sort of takes different things away. So I'm really curious because I feel the big project energy from you, but I'm curious if
Good.
you could help define it a little bit or sort of tell me what it means to you when you hear that. And if you could give like a real life example or give us like a little story or something like that of your energy, that'd be great.
Yeah. I mean, because it's a play on words, you might approach it as a sense of swagger or bravado. I think that's not the ideal kind of big project energy for me. I'm thinking about it more as being the calm, quiet confidence leader that can hold a container for the team to do good work, building trust that encourages the team to perform at their best, and being really interested in what's going on with people, what are their own growth trajectories and goals, being genuinely interested in them in a way that makes them want to perform well in their work. I think that allows you to accomplish much more ambitious work than I don't know, like swaggering around and acting like you know all the answers from the beginning. I think I'm feeling that in a kind of low key way in my volunteer web design team work, where the first three meetings I led, just sort of doing my classroom facilitation stuff, making sure that we're really clear about the agenda topics. Someone told me at the end of each of those first three meetings, this is the most productive meeting we've had in a very long time. It's a team with very limited capacity, but we've accomplished a tremendous amount in 6 months. And like, it feels good to be there. More people are coming to the meetings. We laugh during the meetings sometimes. I often start with this. I don't know what these memes are actually called, but I've been calling them mood boards. The image I have up there is like, on a scale of alpaca, how are you doing today? And it's one of these like grids with 9 very expressive alpaca pictures. And so I often start meetings with those when there's a little bit of space for whimsy and have everyone go around and say what number they are. It's a quick capacity management check. And it also makes people laugh and everyone speaks, which gets people kind of primed for the conversation. Yeah, I don't know, like things like that and the kind of like buy into the work are making it really fun to be there.
I love that so much. I seriously, I really love that. That's
Get yourself an
fantastic.
alpaca grid.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I'm obsessed with your definition, sort of a big project energy, because I do think that on the surface it does kind of come off as this like loud and proud, and then you definitely do see that there's a aspect that is much more thoughtful and much more calculated and much more based in, like you said, quiet confidence and adapting your strategy to like sort of the needs of the group and choosing the path that's going to be most effective. So I really love that juxtaposition of like it coming across, so macho. And then when you actually unpack, it looks very different. So yes, that's amazing. So, as you're kind of in your transition now, what advice would you give to someone that's interested in project management or is maybe like a few months behind you? And how do they just get started and get thinking about it?
I mean, I think I'm best prepared to speak to a transition from teaching. The reality is this job market is rough. So if you still have a job and can hang in there a little bit longer, I would say start informational interviews now. I was resistant to doing that initially, but people have been so generous. And it's just like really nice to talk with people about like what are they doing, gives you a much better sense of like what kind of work might you actually be able to do or what kind of project management are you headed for, things like that. So start with informational interviews. If you're going to do a PMP process, I think the main value there is about learning the vocabulary to explain the project management skills you already have, especially teachers know learning design. Do your learning design for your PMP process and make sure you're applying what you learn as you go. Maybe that's building a project portfolio, like turning stuff you've already done into project documentation. Maybe it's, signing up for an additional initiative in your workplace that allows you to practice this vocabulary as you're learning it. Um, I would also say, especially in the context of such a challenging job market, you need a way to really anchor into like, what are you headed for? What are you trying to get to? You have to have a strategy for resiliency in the face of rejection. And so for me, like rejection emails sting, especially when I was like really excited about the role. But I'm able to move pretty quickly to, I'm looking for the right place for me. I'm not looking for just any job. I'm looking for the place where I can make the most of the skills I have, and where they'll really be valued. And honestly, I'm also like looking for a workplace with healthy relationships. And so if you can move to this framework of like a rejection is a gift in a way, that wasn't the right place. You need some kind of strategy for like being clear about where you're headed so that those rejections don't derail you. Yeah, I mean, I guess the like final thing I would say, especially for teachers in the context of like all the pressure on public education right now, you also need to make some space for the grief of like career transition. There's like an identity loss. There was like a particular vision of your future. And there's like exciting things to be done on the other side of that transition. But the grief also has an energy cost. And like just pushing through it is not going to serve you well. So yeah, make some space in between to feel whatever feelings are coming up.
Thank you so much. I really do feel like that really comes from a place of knowing and wisdom, what you're saying, and that's such a hard thing to go through. Especially like your example, which is wild to me, hostile takeover, things are changing rapidly. I mean, that's crazy.
I've
I
learned
appreciate you
a
sharing.
Yeah, I've learned a lot from it. And I think it's made me more compassionate, which I think will make me a better leader going forward.
Without a doubt, without a doubt. That does kind of make me question. I feel like I would be sad if I let you go and didn't ask you, like, what is your like craziest like professor story? And if there's a way for you to get to project management, then that's amazing. But if not, like, I just need to know, like, what kind of like craziness do you deal with? I'm sure people just don't even realize what goes on.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know. It's not a question I've thought about before. I was teaching gender studies, so a lot of what I was teaching, like talking with students about, is gender and sexuality. And so I was teaching an upper division seminar of like 6 students, trying to talk about like, you know, queer history and politics and things like that. And there was one day they all came into the classroom and no one would speak. And I was like, what's going on? We have to talk about the readings. Um, and no one would tell me, but I found out from a colleague later that they'd all had a big fight over the weekend. There was this like extracurricular social drama that then became my problem in the classrooms.
Well, I just want to say, which is, it sounds like a professor only problem, but is absolutely, something that
Yeah,
could happen in corporate.
yeah,
Because I'll be on a project, we'll have like many meetings, and then all of a sudden I walk in one day and everyone's like changed their tune, and I'm like, okay, guys, like what happened? Because we were good, and now all of a sudden we're not good. Like what's going on?
yeah. Like what happened on the other project you're all assigned to.
Literally, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, just all of those kind of unexpected scenarios, I think, has given me a lot of practice over the last 13 years, figuring out how to get at like what's actually going on here, what's unstated in what I'm being told.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. That's so fun. I can only imagine the things you've had to deal with in
That
that
was a
kind
good
of a
question.
career in teaching. So yeah, and thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate this. This has been such a treasure, such a joy. If someone wanted to find you, sounds like LinkedIn is maybe a good platform. How do they get a
Mhm.
hold of you?
Yeah, I would just say if there are any listeners working through like team capacity or team conflict kind of problems, I'd be very interested in talking. And for anyone else who wants to engage with me more about any of these topics, LinkedIn is the best place to find me.
Thank you so much, Nick. And to everybody listening, I am really happy that we got a chance to talk to Nick. I think he brought up some really, really great points just about, managing the people side of projects, which is gonna be a reoccurring theme. We're gonna talk about it a lot more. And I actually think really not a lot of folks are talking about like the mental load of project management and how you deal with that as a leader. So I think there's gonna be more on this in the future, but lots of good food for thought. So thank you again.